We say that God works in mysterious ways, and it never fails to amaze me how often the choir selections match what I've put together as far as some of the service is concerned. I write the sermons. I pick the hymns that you sing, whether you like them or not. I mean, they're my choice. Marilyn does all the stuff with the choir, and we do not converse or communicate about any of these things. And yet, if you were listening to the words, it matched exactly what the scripture reading was, and it matched exactly what the theme of the sermon is. So something's happening out there. It's kind of interesting. When our daughter Kirsten was approaching the end of her high school career and considering her future as a college student, we discussed at the dinner table one evening what she thought she might want to do professionally when she was finished with her formal education. She said she had been thinking of something in the computer field, like programming. Now, this kind of took us by surprise because the conditions and requirements of that kind of job did not seem to fit her personality. She was and is a people person, and we were pretty sure she would not be happy working all day in some kind of a cubicle. And while she was a good student overall, her major strengths were in the liberal arts, not the sciences. So we asked her if she was thinking along such lines because that was what she really wanted to do, or because she had been told that that was where the jobs were going to be. She indicated the latter. Well, our question and her thinking persuaded her that what she really wanted to be was a teacher, and that is what she became, a very good and very happy teacher. A column by Nicholas Kristof in the Tampa Bay Times of August 18 got me thinking along certain lines, which led to a recollection of that conversation that we had had with our daughter. His piece was titled, "Why the Humanities Still Matter Even in the Digital Age." And he began with, what use could the humanities be in a digital age? University students focusing on the humanities may end up, at least their parents' nightmares, as dog walkers for those majoring in computer science. But for me, the humanities are not only relevant, but also give us a toolbox to think seriously about ourselves and the world. I wouldn't want everybody to be an art or literature major, but the world would be poorer, figuratively anyway, if we were all coding software or running companies. We also want musicians to awaken our souls, writers to lead us into fictional lands, and philosophers to help us exercise our minds and engage the world. Kristof goes on to speak about three philosophers who he particularly admires because of what they have to say and suggest directly, and what they have to suggest because it directly impacts on our world and all that inhabit it. And I realized as I was reading his piece how much of what these philosophers have said correlated and connected with the teachings of our faith. Teachings which certainly, unfortunately, and often tragically, we too frequently choose to ignore or reject. Therefore, this morning I would like to piggyback on Kristof's observations, give them a religious twist or tweaking, and hopefully explore what I think Jesus might have said or actually did say on the same themes. Sir Isaiah Berlin was a 20th century Jewish social and political theorist, philosopher, and historian of ideas who was born in Latvia but spent most of his life in Britain and was thought by many to be the dominant scholar of his generation. Wikipedia says of him that he excelled as an essayist, conversationalist, and raconteur, and as a brilliant lecturer who improvised rapidly and spontaneously, richly elusive and coherently structured material. Berlin came up with what he called the pluralism of values. As part of this theory, he described the world as muddled and complex, with many competing values and yet no simple yardstick by which to determine which should trump the others. He suggested that we all yearn for one true answer, but it is our lot to struggle to reconcile inconsistent goals. However, in cautioning against the hand-wringing because of the world's complexity, that sometimes paralyzes us to the extent that we cannot act. Berlin argued for acknowledging the doubts and uncertainties that exist and then forging ahead. We've got to take chances, we've got to take risks, even if we sometimes then get it wrong. In Berlin's words, principles are not less sacred because their duration cannot be guaranteed. Indeed, the very desire for guarantees that our values are eternal and secure in some objective heaven is perhaps only a craving for the certainties of childhood. We'd all like life to be filled with more yeses and nos, We'd like more black and white and a bit less gray. We'd like our decision-making to be easier. I would offer the words I read earlier to you from Micah and Matthew as setting forth pretty straightforward values which one can readily understand and which have stood the test of time. However, the complexity comes when we try to implement and apply such teachings. Do justice, love kindness, love God above all else and with our whole beings while walking humbly with Him, love our neighbors as we love ourselves while treating them as we want to be treated. Nothing confusing there. But the devil is in the details, because the question is, how? How? How can we secure and assure justice when money determines so much of what happens in our world, and those with enough of it can usually buy the results they desire in any given situation? How? How can we demonstrate kindness in those circumstances when doing so works against our own best interests or those of individuals who are closest to us? How? How can we love an abstract, seemingly out there God above all else when the all else is what we know we want and think we need? How? How can we walk humbly with such a God when we find it difficult to walk humbly with anyone, anywhere or anytime? How? How can we love and treat each other as we want to be loved and treated, especially if and when they really tick us off? None of this is easy, as we can see when we consider how hard it was even for Jesus, who died as a result of it. But if we can somehow do it all better, what a difference that would make in our world. Take chances, take risks, go boldly forth to do whatever we can do step by step, and our lives will change as we change. John Rawls, American philosopher, was considered by many of his colleagues to be the most important moral and political philosopher of the 20th century. Teaching at both Harvard and Oxford, he received numerous prizes and awards for his work, and upon receiving the National Humanities Medal in 1999, was lauded by President Bill Clinton, who said that his thinking helped a whole generation of learned Americans revive their faith in democracy itself. Rawls offered a useful way of thinking about many of today's more troubling issues, such as poverty, such as inequality, such as the lack of empathy in our society of people for people, while exploring questions of fairness. This thinking led to compelling explanations of why we should create safety nets to support the poor and build good schools to help young products of poverty achieve better lives. Along these lines, Rawls suggested that we imagine we are gathering to agree on a social contract, a guideline for our society and our world, if you will, but from an original position. This means that as we do this envisioning, we don't know if we will be rich or poor, smart or dumb, healthy or handicapped, diligent or lazy, American or Bangladeshi. We don't know if we will be born into a wealthy suburban family or to a single mom living in the inner city. He reasoned that if we developed a social contract from such a position of equality, we would be far more likely to favor measures that would protect those at the bottom, because we might wind up being those at the bottom. Now, there would still be inequalities, certainly to create incentives for economic growth, and because, for whatever reason, some would make it better than others. But if done from an original position, we would choose social structures that would allow inequality only when the least advantaged members also benefited. We Americans are so much better off than most of the people of the world, and some Americans are so much better off than other Americans. Some of that comes about because of hard work, but a lot of it results from luck, where we were born and who we were born to, as well as a bit of deck stacking by those who have it and are determined to keep it. Where do you stand on the issue of illegal immigration, especially of children? And would your opinion be different if you were one of those illegal immigrants, especially a child? Where do you stand on aid to impoverished countries? And would your opinion be different if you were living there? Where do you stand on the inequality of salaries and other forms of financial compensation between executives and laborers? And would your opinion be different if you were the one working just as hard and receiving so much less? Where do you stand on raising the minimum wage? And would your opinion be different if you were struggling to survive on less than $8 an hour? Where do you stand on free lunches for poor children? And would your opinion be different if your child was one of the 30,000 in America who needed a free lunch in order to have at least one good meal a day? These are the kinds of issues Rawls said should be considered from an original position, and that if they were, the resulting rules and regulations developed to form the social structure would be more fair, and those with the least would still have enough. And I think Jesus pretty much said the same thing. Those goats who were condemned for not caring about the hungry, the lonely, the naked, the sick, the imprisoned, could have been sheep if they had only treated their fellow human beings with empathy and compassion. To what degree is our world ruled by those whose primary and perhaps only concern is self-interest? Peter Singer, an Australian moral philosopher who teaches at both Princeton University and the University of Melbourne, specializes in applied ethics and approaches ethical issues from a utilitarian perspective. His best-known book, Animal Liberation, deals with animal rights. As you might suspect, Singer has pioneered the public discussion of our moral obligation to animals and argues that it is wrong to inflict cruelty on cows, hogs, chickens, or other domesticated animals we raise for food just so that we can enjoy a tasty and inexpensive as possible lunch. Is such thinking extreme? If so, then why have we long asserted that people should be arrested for torturing cats or organizing dogfights? Singer just takes it a step further and focuses on industrial agriculture, turning what we put on our plates into a moral as well as a gastronomical issue. Whether or not one is a vegetarian, Singer's arguments still apply. In this vein, Nicholas Kristof asks, do we skip regular eggs and pay more for cage-free? Should I eat goose liver pâté achieved by torturing geese? Do we give preference to restaurants that try to source pork or chicken in ways that inflict less pain? In our reading from Genesis, we heard one version of how God created humanity and gave people dominion over other forms of life. Now, recognize in the first place that it was people who wrote that people were in charge. It might have been different if it was horses or bears who reported the structuring. But beyond that, let us not think that having dominion means that we thus possess a kind of divine carte blanche to do anything we want with those other life forms for whatever reason, especially our own convenience and comfort. Most scholars agree that in this instance, dominion means stewardship. That we humans are to take care of those living beings which populate this planet with us, but not to exploit them, and certainly not to show them cruelty and unconcern. Indeed, such an approach is in our own best interest because more and more we realize that all life is interconnected, and especially long-term, the hurting of one species hurts all. Now I'm kind of back where I started, plugging for an approach to life and work that goes well beyond quantity and calls for quality. If life is to be more than existence, the humanities are not obscure or arcane or irrelevant. And our faith certainly teaches that life should be worth living. To adapt to a changing world, we definitely need new software for our cell phones, but we also need new ideas. The same goes for literature and architecture and languages and theology, where we also need openness and flexibility as well as new ideas and insights. Our world is enriched when coders and marketers dazzle us with smartphones and tablets, but by themselves they are just slabs. It is the music, the essays, the entertainment, the communication, the art which they access that animate them and animate us. Technology can take us just so far, and it is important. But alone it cannot produce fullness of life. To even begin to achieve that, we need the extras, which might prove to be the most important. Are you living a full life? And what are you doing to make life fuller for those around you, including the non-humans? We can be part of making this a better world for all its inhabitants.